Did you notice in Ahsoka when the E-Wings stopped Sabine on that road out of Lothal?
Yeah.
And they just do that little imperceptible nod that if you were actually in real life stood 6 foot away from them, you'd go...
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't.
I think they nodded at me.
Let's just start this episode with a nice little nod.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Misa back.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 208 of Making Tracks. And as the intro suggests, I'm joined by Mark Newbold. And Mark and the rest of Fantha Tracks turned 7 this week. Yeah, it was on the 31st October 2017. At 24 minutes past 1 a.m. that Fantha Tracks was born. And it's now had over 20,535 posts, maybe 36 by the time you listen to this podcast, plus 565, maybe 566 podcasts, and over 1,100 videos. That's quite a lot of work. You've been busy. How's the last 7 years been for you, sir?
I think you just said the word. It's been very busy. It's been eventful. It doesn't feel like 7 years because we have that pesky pandemic. So it doesn't feel like as long as it has been. But yeah, 7 years is mad. I can't believe it's gone so quickly.
I mean, and this is the typical lowball, easy entry podcaster question. And so I'm going to turn it to you. 7 years ago, did you expect Fantha Tracks, well, not so much to be continue now, because I mean, you guys have always had an amazing track record with longevity, but 7 years ago for this to be quite as busy as it is now?
I expected or hoped, I can't expect, because personalities, people, folks come and go from the site and things happen. So you can never expect it to be crystal clear sailing. But I did expect to be going, but I didn't expect to be so busy. I'm glad though. I mean, there's never any shortage of things to talk about. You can never accuse Fantha of not having something to read.
Or listen to, or in fact, watch. And as we say at the end of each episode, it's all free. There's no Patreon, there's no subscribers, premium. Mark and the rest of the team, and myself, we do it all just for the love of Star Wars and the love of the Force. Happy 7th anniversary to Fantha Tracks. What have you had into your collection this week, sir?
Well, I have actually had some stuff coming this week. So when we spoke last, on episode 207, weirdly, I had a copy of an Indiana Jones novel, the Raiders novel, that I've been looking for forever. That kind of got me thinking and got me looking. So I have coming my way the hardback. It's the US, I think it's the Sci-Fi Book Club hardback of Raiders coming. But another one did arrive, which I'd never seen, even just scooching around sort of Google Images. And it was the second print, the US second print, but it had the classic Amstel cover, but the border, if you like, was just like the UK one where it was in a coloured foil, but this was in silver. So I'd never seen that. So I was well chuffed with that. So it's the US print, very similar to the UK Corgi prints, but in silver. So that's turned up. I also got the Star Wars The Poster Collection from Studio Press, which I've actually reviewed on the site. There's a review on the site. Difficult to review a book that is all about posters, but it is a very nicely put together book. And if you want that kind of artwork on your wall, and who wouldn't, they're nice. They're decent size. They're sort of A3 size. They're a good size. Yeah. They really look the business. So that was a nice thing. Ghost Stand's got another Ghost Stands set for the cloud car now, my diecast cloud car, that arrived, so I'm chuffed to bits with that. And the most interesting one, I think, and this was prompted by David Collins, who's worked obviously through all the Lucas projects and Lucas companies, but what's really his kickoff was Lucas Arts more than anything. Right. The thing that really put his name out there. He worked on Jedi Power Battles, which is coming back. There's a fresh release of Jedi Power Battles. He put a post out of a small box, probably 3 by 3 inches, with the Jedi Power Battles logo on it in gold and white, ever so nice. And when you open it up, inside is a key ring of a lightsaber hilt and Qui-Gon with his lightsaber. So I managed to find this. I saw it. I thought, that's the coolest little thing. That'll go really nice on my computer game shelf. So I ordered it, turned up. Box was mint. Had it about a week. probably just after we spoke last. And I thought yesterday when he was doing stuff upstairs, I'm going to have a look. I haven't even looked inside. It could be a box full of pebbles for all I know. So I opened up the thing, and the key ring is perfect. And the Qui-Gon figure was upside down. So I turned the Qui-Gon figure over, and he's got a lightsaber, which should be ramrod straight. No, this thing looks like half a hula hoop wrapped over his shoulder. So it's not something I can display. No. It's fine. Got it for a great price. And the box is perfect. I'm fine with all of that. But yeah, it just made me smile that a lot of those lead figures that came out back in the day, and this probably isn't lead. This is probably after that lead period. This is like 2000, 2001, if I remember, when Power Battles came out. It's warped right over. Like the Disney Store stuff where the lightsabers look like sticks of celery. It's a bit like that.
Yeah, it's a bit soft and malleable.
So that's my stuff. There's been other little odds and sods, but like last week, it was more sort of collectible related, stands and stuff like that. What about yourself, mate?
I've got some stuff coming, but nothing that has arrived this week. I've got a friend of mine, Jenna, to do a Remembrance Day memorial patch and pin. So yes, lovely kind of like hand-drawn kind of thing, because it's very difficult to try and translate anything from a design into like a patch, especially like an embroidered patch, because the detail in it kind of gets lost. So we've done that in a pin. So those have arrived and they have started. I sent the first wodge of envelopes out yesterday, hopefully dropping onto the Rebel Legion's members' doorsteps this week, fingers crossed.
Let's move on and talk about some news, because after all, we are Fantha Tracks, and that is what we do. Let's kick off with the sad news that artist Greg Hildebrandt has passed away. He'd been ill for some time. He was one of the first artists that many of us as kids would have seen. He and his brother Tim, who passed away a number of years ago, worked together on that classic Star Wars poster art of Luke with the saber and Leia, just the beautiful colours, the lush colours, and it introduced a lot of people to Star Wars. I had the good fortune to speak to him at New York Comic Con about 6 years ago for Insider and for Fantha in our early days, just kicking off as a site at our first New York Comic Con. And he was a wonderful fella, very chatty, very engaging, very forthcoming with information, talks us through his process, and it was a fascinating process of how he brings a piece of work together. So check out Insider and check out our chat with him. And we say this a lot as these folks pass. Not that long ago, James Earl Jones left us, and there's been a number of Star Wars names over the recent years that have left us. It's another little part of our childhood gone, isn't it?
It is really, and as you say, the Hildebrandt artwork, it's got such an iconic style, hasn't it? As you said, that original poster artwork, it was something that is so intrinsically tied to first Star Wars film in 77 when that came out. With that artwork, you can almost have a niche focus of just collecting things with that artwork on, because there's something about it, isn't it? But when you take Star Wars as its own individual film and not look at it from a saga or even a trilogy perspective, it kind of encapsulates what really the essence of that film is very succinctly and done in, with such aplomb and style and that. Without getting on the soapbox, there's definitely this shift towards digital. It feels a little bit stuck on and a little bit photoshoppy in places and mass produced. And this is kind of going back to the time when theatrical film posters are masterpieces in their own right. But hopefully something may come from this just by bringing Greg's name up again. Aspiring artists might take a look at some of their previous artworks, both him and his brother's done, and it might inspire the next iteration of Star Wars posters come down the line.
Hi, this is David W. Collins, voice actor for Star Wars and sound designer at Skywalker Sound. You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
An interesting article arrived on StarWars.com. It was an interview with Iain McCaigs, the designer, talking about the Phantom Menace and his work on that show. But also, he mentioned a very, very interesting element that could have come into the film, but didn't. He says, and I quote, "For a time, the older Jedi was named Obi-Wan, and the younger Jedi was named Qui-Gon. It was very poignant that at the end, as Obi-Wan dies and Qui-Gon defeats Darth Maul and stays with his master as he passes away, he not only takes on his master's quest, but he takes on his name. Qui-Gon becomes Obi-Wan. That's why when you see Alec Guinness in A New Hope, he puts his hood down and goes, Obi-Wan. Now that's a name I've not heard, because he's not Obi-Wan, he's Qui-Gon, and right at the end, George changed it. So, as a concept, you can kind of see where Lucas would have been going with that. Yeah. And also, as I mentioned in the article, you have got the Sabe Padme sort of swap scene in the Sacred Place when they're talking to Boss Nass. Padme comes forward and explains who she is, and there's that little knowing nod between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. So maybe this would have been a little bit too much like that. But 25 years on, and we've had Phantom in our lives for a quarter of a century now, so it's very well set in our heads. Mm-hmm. Do you think that if George had have gone with this, I mean, we wouldn't have known any different. Do you think that would have been something people would have bought into? Could you see that working? Do you think there's any sort of artifacts left from that thought process that are still in the film where you go, that could have worked? Because when Qui-Gon looks at Obi-Wan and, maybe they could have made it work. Do you think there's anything that would have made this work? Or do you think it was probably a good idea that George has left it?
I personally think it's a good idea that this was left on the floor or in the waste paper basket, depending on at what point of madness did George Lucas come up with his notion. It's always going to be the risk of going back and doing a prequel and then trying to get everything to align perfectly. I don't think there's anything that jumps straight out of my mind where you could think if maybe there'd been an extra couple of lines or a scene between the two that they would have done that. It would seem a bit odd. But again, like you said, unless if it was an idea, then whether or not George would then go and build extra things into the film to make it feel more natural. I can remember when Phantom Menace came out, maybe it's me just being a bit rubbish, and I fully hold my hands up and say it probably is. But the whole Padme swap, I didn't see that coming. And I still kind of feel the way that it slightly is executed is just a little bit clunky. But I'm pretty sure it took me to actually sit down and watch a film when it came out on DVD and go, right, so from this point, she's not Amidala, she's now, and it's just like, and then you have to kind of follow it through, and you're just like, who's that in the seat? The Naboo ship. Is that Keira Knightley? Is it Natalie Portman? I mean, was that just me being thick, or was that actually pretty well hidden? And have I just massively missed something in all my years?
No, I think your reception to it is the exact intention of what the scene is. So I think if you'd sat down with Lucas and you'd have said what you said, he'd have gone, well, that's great, because that's kind of what I wanted you to think. I mean, now, like I say, we've had 25 years of watching, and now, on first view, if you've seen Phantom for the first time, you've never seen Keira Knightley before. You've probably only seen Natalie Portman in a couple of things like Leon and a couple of other bits and bobs. She's still a kid. There's not that much age difference between the two. So you're not going to spot any real differences between the two actresses. And if it fooled you as a viewer, and a dedicated, keen viewer as you were, then I guess Lucas and team have done their job perfectly, haven't they?
I mean, I suppose it's the whole thing, isn't it? It's the whole idea of who the handmaidens were, and which do get explored in the E.K. Johnson novels, and I think really well, especially the first one, because then when you start seeing all these handmaidens kind of lined up, and you're like, oh, actually, they all look roughly the same. They all have a similar facial structure, so it's intended. It's not kind of on the level of Darth Sidious and Emperor Palpatine, where if anybody who was, shall we say, quote, a fan would have been surprised by the time he gets to Revenge of the Sith, and it's like, oh my God.
But I suppose on that exact point, actually, if they had have done this in Phantom, again, we wouldn't have known any different. But maybe we'd have looked
That's
back,
the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Maybe we'd have looked back and gone, well, Sidious and Palpatine are the same guy, fooling people. Padme and Sabe are playing the same two people, because they're swapping between Padme and Queen Amidala, essentially, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's a fudge there. If you've got Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon also swapping, it's too much, isn't it?
It starts to get a little bit too much, exactly. And I think there's always that thing, wasn't there? You kind of get hints of this when you even watch the beginning documentary of the making of episode 1. You kind of get this feeling that I think George knew he was kind of pushing, I think, the limits to what the average viewer would kind of accept from maybe a film. Yeah. And maybe, like you said, this might have been about one step too far and that. And whether or not actually then, I mean, it's quite a nice thing, because you wonder, maybe there's even Japanese historical examples of this. But because you'd think, if you take on somebody's name, it's quite an honorific kind of thing to do. So it's quite a lot of honor steeped in it. So it's whether or not it would then slightly go against the Jedi kind of ethos of not having attachments.
That's a great point, because we've seen the council, and it's one thing Ewan McGregor as Qui-Gon Jinn, as it would have been, taking on the name of Obi-Wan Kenobi and his mission and carrying on. That would surely mean that by episode 2, which, as we know, was a decade later, he'd have had to go rogue. He'd have had to leave the Order, because the Order's going, you're not Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan died on Naboo. We know that. So that doesn't feel like in the long term that would have worked. But I think, to your point, there could be something in that. But then, as the sort of the monolithic center stone of Star Wars, especially with the Force, that the Jedi Council is, and the Temple and everything else, the Order, that wouldn't fly in. You've kind of seen that already in the film with other characters taking different names. I'm curious. It was an interesting piece for McCaig to bring up. Claire and Johanna talk about it on this week's Planet Leia. They doing their retrospective on Phantom Menace, and they spoke about the handmaidens and various elements. So there's quite a deep dive, a nice little rabbit hole or hoodoo hole you can go down if you want to with that one. But I think Phantom more than almost any of the others, because when George made A New Hope, if New Hope hadn't have been the big hit, Splinter of the Mind's Eye would have been a TV movie, essentially, made on a monster, mega cheap budget. It would have been rebooted like Battlestar Galactica.
Well, exactly. We wouldn't have been, I don't think we'd be sat here talking about it. And Fantha Tracks wouldn't have been 7 years old because of like one film and a crappy made-for-TV sequel.
I'd have probably still been doing Lightsaber and posting 2 things a week. But when you get to Phantom Menace and George knows, like he didn't know this when he made A New Hope, or Star Wars obviously as was, but he didn't know he was going to get to make Empire and Jedi or what they were going to be. It was blue skies, wasn't it? He was making it up.
Absolutely.
When he comes back to Phantom Menace and the Pepsi deal and all the other stuff that was happening, he knew he was, hook or by crook, he was making 3 films, and he kind of knew 50% of the plot of the next one, 70% of the plot of the next one. He kind of knew where he was taking it. So he could set in place certain things that would go further throughout that trilogy. Whereas in Star Wars, Yoda could have been a pink fluffy cloud. It didn't matter, did it? There was nothing to refer to. But it's only gets Phantom Menace, you can't make Yoda a pink fluffy cloud, can you? You know, there's certain constraints.
He makes him a green catcher's mitt, I believe is what the boys at Rebel Force Radio like in the original 1999 Yoda puppet to.
Very wise, yeah.
But no, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, that's it, isn't it? Like, it's a bit like almost what we kind of said on some levels to do with the Acolyte. It's like, you know, kind of where this is all leading to. It's leading, ironically, to Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace is then leading via 2 other films to Star Wars: A New Hope. Yeah. So the logical explanation, and I think the logic explanation I've always had for the whole Ben Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn thing is purely just down to the fact that, you know, obviously he's on Tatooine and he's got to make a disguise, and he's just basically had to forget the name Obi-Wan. And you kind of wonder, like, you know, wonder how long it would be if you went, I'm no longer Mark Newbold, I'm now Tom Newbold. Yeah. Wonder how long it would be after everybody's got used to it and referred to as Tom, that then if somebody goes, oh, weren't you Mark Newbold? You'd be like, oh, yeah, that's a name I've not heard in however long. It could just be that, you know. But swapping between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, that's a very interesting thing. I have to say, very massive like props to Iain McCaigs for A, remembering it, and B, for bringing it up. Very interesting point.
Hi, this is Guy Henry, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
So a few weeks ago, I had the good fortune to travel to Farnborough for FanX Live, and whilst there, interviewed a bunch of Star Wars folks, including Dickey Beer. Dickey was the stunt double for Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi, and a few other characters as well. So here's myself and Dickey talking for the first time at FanX Live in Farnborough.
So I'm here with Dickey. We are at FanX in Farnborough. It's Sunday morning. How's the day going for you so far?
It's okay, nice and quiet.
How's life with you? Keeping busy?
Yeah, keeping busy. Not too much right now because the industry in America is not doing very well, as we all know. But other than that, I'm fine.
And what do you turn your hand to when that side of your life is a bit quieter? Because we've had, just in the last few years, obviously the pandemic and the writers' strikes, and it has unbalanced a lot of things. What do you do to keep yourself ticking over?
I got a bunch of 2 camera cars back in LA, and I used my spare time to upgrade them and do some work on them. So I keep myself busy.
And you're always trying to find new ventures, new things to do.
Yeah.
Don't let things get stale.
No, don't want to sit at home do nothing.
No. Well, I don't suppose you get the chance with your involvement with Star Wars. That obviously our specific thing. Unbelievably, last year was 40 years since Jedi, which seems ridiculous.
Was it 40?
83.
Last year? No, 83. Yeah. Well, 83 it came out.
82?
We did it in 82, yes.
Can you believe now, and I ask this of a lot of people, and it seems more relevant as the years go on, can you believe you're still at a show like this with the pictures on the table, talking to people like myself about a project you did for...
No idea. I had no idea. We had no idea that it would go this long. And as far as I know, it's the only franchise that still get the new generations in. You know, the little kids, they are crazy about Star Wars. I don't know if it's just because of Star Wars or if it also about, the TV shows that they're doing, like The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba and all that kind of stuff. It probably has something to do with it, but
that's an interesting point. I'd not thought of that. Obviously, Mandalorian visually is very similar, and Boba had his own series.
Right.
It constantly refreshes.
Right.
And you're part of one of many performers that brought that character to life. It's a rich lineage. It's only really Vader you can compare in that sense.
Yeah, and also like his appearance on stage on the screen wasn't all that long.
No, not that many characters have been that impactful with such little screen time.
Exactly. And I know I've been told that when the premiere of Return of the Jedi came out in America, and George Lucas was in the audience, and when Boba Fett went into the pit, everybody in the audience went like, "Oh no!" And that's when George Lucas realized that he made a mistake.
Yeah.
He should not have let him go in there.
And isn't it funny that all those years later, when Phantom Menace came out and Darth Maul goes and gets chopped in half, and it was a similar reaction to... He knows how to write good villains, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's good at the hero's journey, but he's probably better at the villains. Boba wasn't the only thing you were involved with in Jedi. Can you give us a sketch of some of the other characters that you were involved with?
The Mandalorian, I was one of those. One character was called Barada. That was just me. There was nobody else in that costume. Then obviously Biker Scout, Rebel Soldier, Stormtrooper, and also I did some doubling for Luke Skywalker.
Oh right, okay. Which scenes was that for?
That was around the Sarlacc pit. One of the things I did was the jump from the one skiff to the other as him, and a few more of those. Parts of the fight.
There's a few actors, isn't there, that have been in... I think Ian Liston was an ATAT driver and a snowspeeder pilot in the same sequence, and you've got your involvement with Fett and Luke in the same sequence. There's a few performers that are sort of in two places at once.
Yeah, that happens. But one of those.
Yeah.
But I wasn't supposed to be his double. His double got hurt, so he couldn't do it, and that's why I was replaced. Or I replaced the stunt double, let's put it that way.
And do you enjoy like I say, we're here at an event now, do you enjoy the opportunity to talk about your experiences?
Oh yeah. Like normally, I don't know if I have a panel today, but normally I do panels, and I like those because then you get reaction from the people. They ask questions, and then you tell them stories about how we all did it, and some stories are fun and some stories are just interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, we love hearing your stories. Thanks for giving me your time. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. No problem. Take care.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, a Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
So, heading back to Farnborough for FanX Live and another conversation, this time with Hassan Taj. Hassan was R2-D2 in The Rise of Skywalker. He also most famously played Basil in The Acolyte. So here's myself and Hassan catching up at FanX Live in Farnborough.
So we're here at FanX in Farnborough. It is near the end of the day on Sunday. I'm sat here with Hassan. How you doing?
I'm all good, thank you. How about you, Mark?
I'm very good, mate. I'm very good. How's the weekend been for you?
It's been good. I've got a lot of good feedback about everything, with certain characters. And yeah, it's just really great seeing everyone come. Quite a good turnout, and yeah, I'm just pleased with all the feedback. I'm glad people enjoyed the performance we did.
Absolutely. It was cool to talk on stage earlier, which was fun.
Yeah.
The Acolyte, Basil. What a cracking character. Tell me a bit about the evolution of that, how you got the role, how it all progressed.
So, with Basil, they came in, the guy called Lewis Wiltshire, he kind of designed him. So then you get, the next department, which is Neil Scanlon. So thanks to him, thanks to the whole of the CFX team. Derek Arnold as well, he helped me a lot with the costume. Well, not with the costume, just he was more movement coordinator, so he helped me with that, with the movements of Basil, and worked with me. Lynn and Matt, who were great puppeteers, he helped puppeteer it, were amazing, because it's all about the coordination and communication with them both, as well as just myself. So they were great. Carl, who did a brilliant job on the head mech, such a good head mech. Jodie, he did a great job on the fur, and then there's loads of other guys from the CFX team that took care of me, which is amazing. I think it was Claire, Sherry, and there might have been Fiona a couple of days, might have been a few others, so if I miss them out, I'm sorry. But yeah, really, really cool, man. Basil's, such a cool, great character to play. So, once it's been designed, then it's about, how we can bring it to life. So there might have been a few auditions for it, and then there's more of a concept to see what we could do. And then we presented to Leslie. Leslie loved it, and then cool, we got the green light for it. So
it's a big collaboration then.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a very big collaboration. Loads of little things are in place. I think with the character of Basil, costumes did a great job as well. So I think Jennifer worked with Neil to help design it. So there's also the practicality of it. It's working with the costumes of how this creature can be, and then practicality of myself of how I will perform in it. And then it comes of, the mix of it and everything, and just how we can make Basil be Basil, really, as best as we can.
He's a fascinating character because he's full of beans and he's up on his toes.
Yeah.
And so for you to convey that in concert with, like you say, all the mech in the head and all the other stuff, how much rehearsal went into that?
So quite a lot, I was practicing, 2 or 3 days a week just with Derek, just doing the movement of him, of what movements we need Basil to be at, what kind of pace he's running at. And then if there was any other sudden movements as well, because once you're in the head, you usually can't see anything, you're blind, and then you've got to work out your senses. But Carl did a great job, so, thankfully he had vision, and he did a fantastic job with the head and the eyes. And the team works together, everyone pulls in, it's like the minor things. Like Matt would give me a rhyme every morning to keep me going. Lynn, would always keep me on the toes, make sure I'm all good. And it was just really, really, a lot of little things that come in place that make a big effect and actually, in the long run, help out. It's with Basil, it's about having a lot of energy, keeping him alive, keeping that movements in him, even if it's just like a little head twitch.
Yeah.
But it's just those things where you've got to constantly keep thinking about, it's a creature, right? So you have to think about how in my eyes, the next thing he was close to him was a beaver. So how a beaver would act, what a beaver would do. And then you got a little bit of maybe what you could say a little bit of a mice in him. So what kind of things a mice would do, that kind of thing of, okay, how can we put it into the performance? How we can meet the needs. I mean, the fight scene was quite funny. I quite enjoyed doing that. Interacting with Pip as well.
Yes.
And the other characters was, great as well. Really enjoyed that. So fun. Jack did a great job as well with Pip. It's just, making it all work, really.
It's interesting that the species has been around for a long time. It's one of the Han Solo books. So it's interesting to see him come to life now.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned Jack with Pip. You feel like loads of people in the Star Wars galaxy could own a Pip.
Yeah.
It feels like now Basil's race, you could see loads of him.
Yeah.
Just, he's kind of like Jawa level. Do you know what I mean? Like being in around and being busy as a tracker.
Of course.
So he's got a specific purpose.
Of course, yeah. It's more of that purpose as well with the tracker thing where, he's an animal and he doesn't care what people think, right? He cares about one thing, himself, and he cares about his own food. But he's got a job to do, so he just cares about completing that job. And as sad as it might be, but to some degree, not caring about what the Jedi think as well. He's quite selfish, and he's got his his animal-like characteristics where he's just, bam, doing his own thing. And that's with, like, certain people as well, they just go into work, do their own thing and go back home, And I think, it's such a cool, cute character as well. He's got those nice, cute features of him. It's like a pet cat, but it's not a pet cat, it's a pet beaver and pet Basil. If we could all have one, then but...
Well, you did a magic job on it. It was fantastic.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mark. I'm glad you liked him, man. Really helped. Chuffed about it.
Good. I like the show. And thanks for giving us your time.
No worries. Thanks, Mark, man. Thanks, everyone.
For everything in one location. Daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
This week we've had a trailer and some key art for season 1, maybe the only season, we don't know yet, of Skeleton Crew. Lands 3rd of December in the States, 4th of December in the UK on Disney+. But everyone's very excited because we are now within a month of that show arriving. And we've had a listener's question. It's from our perennial question asker, Skyhawker, and I shall read it out. Are you ready, Mark? See, nodding. It's good for podcasts. Hi, Marks. So, I'm sure that you've both seen the new Skeleton Crew trailer and have talked about it on this show. I thought the trailer looked fine, but two things stuck in my brain after watching it. Firstly, it seemed to be aimed more at young kids and less for old buggers like me. Secondly, if this series was not under the Star Wars brand, would anyone recognise it as a Star Wars? I saw very little Star Wars reference points in the trailer, and it could have just as easily been a series from a brand new sci-fi franchise. I understand that it's only a trailer, and I will give it a go when it comes out, but I already have doubts about it being something for me personally. Cheers, Skyhawker. So, Skyhawker asks a lot of questions of us, and we're always very grateful, but the most important point, do you think that the pitching of this show, and I think especially with this second trailer and the teaser, the artwork that's come out, the key art that's come out, looks very on point. They've got a style, they've got that very cool 70s sort of font that they're using, looks like it came off the cover of a Sweet album. They've really gone for a certain tone of what we've seen this week, especially this week with the new trailer. Do you think that Skyhawker's got a point? Do you think this is very much pitched at kids? Or do you think that all Star Wars is pitched at kids? Where do you think this sits?
This is an interesting conversation because it basically asks more questions than it answers, I think. And the easy answer is, well, Mr. Skyhawker, when you first saw Star Wars, were you not a kid? That's the very reductive answer to that. Maybe the other reductive answer is, of course, that Star Wars is meant to be for everyone, so therefore it should appeal to all ages. And to a certain extent it is, because I can remember seeing Vox Pops and some news stories back for the special editions, 20th anniversary of re-release of New Hope. And there's people in that queue who are like, I went and saw it back in 77 and I was 35 years old and I thought it was the best thing I've ever seen in my life. You can have a film and a franchise that can have mass appeal. And maybe there is some questions where you have to maybe raise and say, is creating some of these series that are being delineated by demographics causing more harm for the franchise over a wider time period than being benefit? I mean, I know it because it seems like, well, we want Star Wars meant to be for everyone, so therefore there's going to be a series for everyone. But if you made a series that was appealing to everyone in the first place, there comes a moot point. However, when I saw the trailer, first time I saw it was on my phone, which is always a bad place to watch stuff. And I know a lot of people now watch everything on their phones. But when I put it on TV and I watched it that night, I was like, I'm genuinely excited by this. And whilst it may, because it features kids, it's doing two things fairly cleverly. It's obviously trying to target it at like younger audience or teenagers and younger teenagers, really. But also, it totally gave me a nostalgia feeling to the Goonies and all those kind of kids films. Flight of a Navigator, and it was another one which kind of came out when I was kind of like 8 or 9. And then those were also the films that have been on TV throughout the years. And so they might have actually hit on that slight perfect balance with Skeleton Crew. But actually this could appeal to the younger audience, but it's going to appeal to an older audience, but maybe not necessarily the eldest of audiences for Star Wars, but those who kind of came into Star Wars maybe at the tail end of, say, like Return of the Jedi and the Dark Times, like me. Skeleton Crew, I think this trailer looks absolutely freaking awesome. It's got such good energy and a vibe. It's going to hopefully be really fun.
There's a lot in what you just said there to unpack.
Sorry.
But, no, it's good. It's good. First things first, I think one thing you said was, are we harming Star Wars by pitching certain stories at certain demographics? That's a really deep question because Andor, no. I've literally just watched just finished a season 1 rewatch. Rick's Road is up there with anything Star Wars has ever done, in my mind. Yeah, I think absolutely. Andor is an absolute treasure. I've enjoyed everything that's come out in the last few years, but Andor I really like. Now, Andor was deep enough, dark enough, twisting storylines, overlapping stuff. There's enough going on in Andor that if Andor wasn't a Star Wars show and it was a political drama, which is where I place it amongst a lot, you can put it in that sort of bracket of regular, inverted commas, political dramas, then if there'd have been, and I'll just throw an example, if there'd been a sex scene in it, it wouldn't have batted an eyelid. It wouldn't have felt out of place in an earthbound storyline that had the complexity that Andor had. In the Star Wars galaxy, that was the opportunity. If they were ever going to throw anything a little bit more adult in, that was a place to do it. And I'm so glad they didn't, because there's enough inference in Andor that you kind of know what's going on with various things. When Cassian's getting his stuff out of the shower, on Naimos, you kind of know that he's probably had a fun night with that girl. Things have happened. At the start, he's basically going to a brothel. So, there's things in there that are inferred, and that's enough. We don't need to see any more than we see. and that's fine. And a kid can watch it, and smart kids, as they grow up, like we did as kids back in the day, can pick up the inferences, and that's enough. You don't need it sort of splayed out in front of you on screen. So I'm glad that Star Wars has stuck to its guns and done that, because you can have a kid who's 10 who's still like a 6-year-old. You can have a kid who's 10 who's kind of savvy like a 14-year-old. So it doesn't always follow. George saying he was aiming Star Wars at 10-year-olds. Actually, when you're 10 years old, that's quite a broad swathe of maturities, if you want to put it in those terms. Girls mature quicker than boys, but some boys are more into certain things than other kids. Some kids still play with their toys. Some kids don't, So 10 is actually quite a demographic to aim for, and it's very smart. Also, I think with what you've seen in the Skeleton Crew trailer, it's framed through that classic 80s, especially, they've pitched it at the Amblin stuff. The interview on StarWars.com with John Watts and Chris Ford actually goes into a bit more detail when they say, we took influences from Predator. We've took influences from all sorts of stuff. They're drawing their own thing in, and they say in that piece that they sat down with Filoni, and very wisely, Filoni said, if you just make a Star Wars show or a Star Wars project or a Star Wars book and you just use Star Wars as the influence, even though there's 50 years near as damn it of Star Wars is infused with all sorts of influences. So you could arguably do that. You could probably do that, but you're secondhand taking the influences from other writers, other creators. But what Filoni was saying was, George created Star Wars, but George told Star Wars, and his influences were the Westerns and the samurai stuff and that kind of, and he's coming from the 70s, so he's taken a bit of Watergate, a bit of Vietnam, and he's pulling these influences in, and, Nixon is the emperor and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you were doing it now, then you would use other influences. You might want to be influenced by, I don't know, rom-coms, or you might want to use a modern politician as your influence. So you're pulling these influences in. It's very smart that you've got these options to hand. But with the kids, to me, I love Harry Potter. I love the films. Me and Ruth go to the Potter Experience most years and just walk around and love it. And every time Philosopher's Stone or Chamber of Secrets, especially the early ones, comes on, I'm there for it, because those kids are 10 or 11 years old. And when I was 10 or 11 years old, I was reading my Star Wars monthlies, and I was playing with my Palatoy figures. I was listening to the Buena Vista audio books, and I was deep into Star Wars. I'll give you one quick example before I let you back in. Me and Ruth went to Disney on Ice yesterday, and we sat at the indoor arena in Birmingham, and everywhere else it's mums and dads with 5-6-year-old kids, and there's me and Ruth sitting loving it because we love the music and we love Disney, and it's a nice night out, and it's not a mega expensive night. And the thing that lit me up more than anything was when Elsa comes on to do Frozen, and all these little kids in their little Elsa costumes are jumping up and down, going nuts when she's singing and skating around to Let It Go. And I just said to Ruth, I love that, because that's me when I was like 7 or 8 when Star Wars come out. And any hint of Star Wars, I was bouncing up and down like Tigger. So I get that enthusiasm. And I think this could do something like that for younger Star Wars fans, and for older fans who just remember the joy of getting into Star Wars when we were a certain age. I think it could be a win-win for everyone. I'll shut up now and let you talk.
No, that's fine. You carry on. I 100% agree with you, because I can remember even reading the Fate of a Jedi series. And that was, I think, really the first time when that series came out. And this is a complete tangent, so I'll get back onto Skeleton Crew in a minute. But that was the first time that I really recall they kind of brought in this kind of notion of like rolling 24-hour news into Star Wars on the HoloNet. And it kind of was like weird, because it was like a little bit on the nose. But then, like, as you say, you go back to, the influences and the political stuff that George brought in for Star Wars. Basically, to Skyhawker's other point about nothing recognizable to do with Star Wars in this, I don't want to have to go through like frame by frame and kind of go, well, actually, the kind of is. Because I think it raises this question, and it's a question that we've had and we've tried to answer before in many episodes of Making Tracks, and have come back to it in one shape, way, or form or another, is actually what makes up a Star Wars, right? What is it? What are those elements that actually you need for you to be able to say, yes, actually, this is definitely set in a galaxy far, far away, and this isn't. How many of those kind of like elements are there? I mean, because in the trailer, there are X-Wings, there are droids, third or fourth shot, there's Aurebesh on the wall. These are tiny things that actually you kind of do need to watch a couple of times and maybe focus on before you start to bring it all in. However, there's also a big part of me that is kind of like, if you don't know this is Star Wars, if this was completely debadged and I didn't just watch it on like the StarWars.com YouTube, actually, how far before you kind of go, oh yeah, this is Star Wars? And for me, like, actually, the fact there's a droid in like 20 seconds is probably enough. But then when they go to this smuggler's base, I'm just like, well, this looks very Guardians of the Galaxy. There's something very, very like nowhere about it. And it's got that vibe. So then you can go, well, this could just be a space adventure. But then maybe that's actually what it is. Because like you said, Star Wars from the beginning was always pulling from different kind of influences in different ways. And maybe this, again, is just a distillation of, modern pop culture, sci-fi adventure that happens to be set in Star Wars. And I don't necessarily say that's a bad thing. And I don't necessarily say it's a good thing. I guess it's going to be hard to answer this question until I think the series is out, until we kind of get really by the end of the first or second episode, really, because I think it's quite nice. It'll be quite nice to kind of like for us to be in this slightly different galaxy, even though it's set in the galaxy far, far away. I mean, we're kind of in, middle-class suburbia for where it looks like. That's where it looks like it's set, at least to begin with. So that probably isn't an environment that we've really seen before or explored before in Star Wars. So therefore, maybe it won't feel like what we're used to. But then I'm sure there's going to be bits and elements where you'll be like, oh, yeah, totally. This could totally work.
When you see that trailer, you see the kids on their little bikes and they look like BMXs, basically, don't they? With the baskets on the back instead of on the front, so ET can't ride in front of them. When we saw Book of Boba Fett, we saw the scooters, like the mod scooters from Quadrophenia type thing. So they are pulling from the real world. And that was a little bit too on the nose. That didn't quite make sense in Book of Boba.
That didn't work in the aesthetic of Book of Boba
Tatooine.
Fett.
Yeah.
Exactly, in Tatooine. And maybe I think maybe that's because like you had to then understand mod culture. If you were around Brighton and stuff like that in the 60s or early 70s, but that I don't think translates on an accessibility level for most people to get, whereas the kids on the bikes, most kids have had bikes, BMXs and what have you, like, running around like the estates, so that's kind of like a very easy touchstone to connect the viewer to.
But one of the things that I like about this is that I'll go back to Andor, I haven't just watched it. You see Ferrix and you see Rick's Road, and it's very unique. Say unique, it's bricks. That's a very familiar hook for us as viewers, especially in the UK, when most things are made of brick. There's something that's very tangible that you can connect with. And so that is something that anchors you into that location. It's a beautiful location. And then we see the first teaser for Skeleton Crew. And some people didn't like it because it just looks like suburbia. It looks like something out of Star Trek. Well, every planet is unique. There's not another town like Ferrix anywhere in the Star Wars galaxy. It's very, very unique. And we see a lot of stuff that is literally template. A McDonald's in America looks very much like a McDonald's in the UK. Two Star Destroyers on the other opposite ends of the galaxy are going to look the same because you've got that Imperial sort of signature look. Rebel stuff is slightly less or quite a bit less uniform than that because they're ragtag. But around the galaxy, every planet's going to have its own look. So you'll see a version of Star Wars Suburbia in Skeleton Crew, and you're going to see different things. So I like the fact that there's certain elements of it that don't look or feel like Star Wars, because that's expanding Star Wars, isn't it? It's brand new. I think stripping it right back to the smallest elements, and in Skeleton Crew's case, it's kids who get lost in space and tell a story that's kind of unique and doesn't have Mando turning up and Ahsoka turning up and Grogu saving the day, even though it's in the Mandoverse. Pretty much all I've seen from the Mandoverse is Vane. That's all I can really identify at this point.
If you watch it and if you step through it, and there's little bits and bobs like Vane, and like the ships have got a similar kind of paint scheme, like the black and white kind of stripes and that, But again, it's like this is me analysing it and taking it to the next level. But these are kids; they won't be aware of like the Empire or the Rebel Alliance.
They'll know of them, but they won't know the
details. They might know of them. Because it's like, okay, well, yeah, I know of the Romans because I studied it at school in like year 3 or 4 or something. So that will be the thing. Basically, how aware are these kids that we're in the Star Wars galaxy, as it were? Does that make sense?
It makes all the sense, because from, I think, where we are in the timeline, and I could be wrong, but I think we're about 9 years past Jedi now, and these kids are all 9 or 10. So this is the first generation of kids born in the post-Imperial era. So they'll have just learned it at that age. They'll have just learned a little bit of history.
Because they try to pay with, like, they say, Old Republic credits, like the bartender says. So that's pre-Empire.
Is that why the Republic credits is a problem? And are they in, because it's a Watto thing, isn't it? From Phantom, going back to Phantom, it's a Watto issue, isn't it? Republic credits are no good out here. Are they in an area of space that's still held by the Remnant, or are they somewhere else? So,
possibly. I think it's, just because there seems to be kids and pirates, I think this is more a case of whatever ship that they find and discover is obviously ancient. And now those pirates are like, oh, so you just found that money on the ship. I wonder what else is on there. Let's go have a look. We want the ship. And the kid's like, bugger off, this is our ship. And then, it is, Mayhem and shoes. And I think that also kind of like lines up with Jude Law's character, because I think he's a bit of a, don't want to say grifter necessarily, but like an opportunist. I'm sure it'll be made very apparent that he's not helping the kids altruistically. They'll, at least to begin with, there'll be a cost, and probably by the end of it, it'll be like, nah, you keep the money or whatever. If in the first episode you find out that there's a mega galactic corporation trying to buy people's houses and bulldoze them, like Goonies and that might be a little bit on the nose.
Hi, this is Vivian Lyra Blair, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Okay, so what did you make of the music? I mean, obviously it's trailer music.
Yeah.
To be honest, I had to kind of Google what Major Tom was, but like a lot of people were kind of mentioning it. This track from a new wave band, was it Peter Schling or something, or Schelling or something, which is all over this trailer. But the vibe for me feels good. We've kind of departed from the John Williams or the pseudo John Williams epic score type trailer music, and we've kind of gone for something that's on the move, it's lively, it's got a bit of pep to it, and I think it's quite exciting.
I mentioned Potter earlier, and Potter had John Williams do the music for the first three films. So if they'd have gone down that tone, that would have been great. But I did like this. I didn't know the history of the music at all. I didn't pick up on the Major Tom element until I saw other people talking about it. So when I went back and listened to it, I was like, that's kind of cool. And I don't mind that fresh approach to the music, because it works well in Andor. Andor's Nicholas Patel's score is like really off the wall. And I love that. Whereas my favourite since Star Wars came back in 2014, let's say, with Rebels, with Kiner doing Rebels, my favourite soundtrack since then is Solo, which is John Powell. It's kind of in that Williams wheelhouse. And obviously Williams worked on The Adventures of Han track, but it's got a very old school British feel to it, that soundtrack. Okay, Jude Law's the top name on this show, of course he is. But if you're going to have majority of the cast being kids, and then all the sort of the grown-ups around it, which is very E.T., very Goonies. I mean, even down to the logo, like the Lucasfilm logo coming up in that sort of 3-band lettering, which just looked so neat. That's a 70s thing rather than an 80s thing, but they're going for a tone. So back to your point about the music, I want to listen to it again. I don't know what the soundtrack's going to be like. I don't know who's doing the music.
I was going to say, do we know? Has there been any?
I've not heard, no. But if they go for something in that area, hell, why not? Try different things with the music. It doesn't all have to sound like John Williams. All Star Wars was all like that. I think it might get a bit repetitive and just wallpapery. So I like the thought of trying something different.
The moment you start bringing in like Empire and Rebels or like Resistance of First Order, that kind of thing, that's when the John Williams music kind of works, because it's big and it's epic, and also it tells a story in itself. Just the same as not everybody looks the same in a galaxy far, far away. You'd imagine every single planet has its own musical influences, musical styles and stuff. I mean, we saw that kind of with like the Mandalorian score as well, to on some levels, Matt. And there'll be points where you'll be like, this is outright perfect Star Wars music, and there'll be other points you'll be like, well, that's a bit left field, but actually that kind of works. And if you can kind of take the music out of the show and then watch it and then put the music back in, 9 times out of 10, it makes a scene. Without it, or you put something else in its place, you suddenly realise actually how perfect that track is.
This could draw people in. This could make people want to hear it. It's easy on the ear. It's something different. It's a little bit challenging. I love all of that.
Is that everything on our running order for today?
We've drained the list. I mean, there's always more stuff we could talk about, Mark, but there are only so many hours in the day and only so much time to edit.
Exactly, and probably there's only so much time that people actually want to listen to us ramble on. So obviously, Mr. Skyhawker, thank you very much for your questions. And if anybody else wants to send in a listener's question, to do that, you're going to need to know how to get in touch. So, Mark, can you let everybody know how they can do that?
Yes, I can, and here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show Good Morning Tatooine goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, Mark.
Brilliant. Nice one, mate. Well, I think that's me done for this episode as well. So everybody, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week. But until then, have a fantastic Star Wars week, whatever that means to you. And as always, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.